Well folks, it seems we have issues, and I don't mean that you and I have issues, but me and my Lexus have issues. But I think it's mostly down because I personally have issues. In the recent episode you also saw me work under the hood, and I explained how you work with the diagnostic connector over here. But I also showed you that the connector is rotated 180 degrees in regard to the workshop manual. And this is where I have the jumper cable connected in the wrong order. But after I finished this episode, put everything back together, went home, no problem. But the following day the car all of a sudden had an issue, and that's what I'm investigating right now. Anyway, welcome to episode 31 of Project LS400. So what's going on? Well, we've been driving the car for 2,000 kilometers now, mostly without any problems, and I've been careful. On the first test drive I was careful and nothing was wrong, and I could speed up the car at any speed, no problem. It was smooth, it shifted smooth. But after the last episode I went for a drive the other day, and I left a roundabout and I could feel a small hesitation, and I mean it was light but it was very noticeable. So my OCD kicked in and I tried to find out what it was, and my first thought was, well, it may be the ECU, that the capacitor's gone leaking. So in the meantime I took the ECU out and I checked, and indeed there were 2 leaking capacitors. So with that I hoped I had found the culprit. I installed 8 new capacitors in the ECU, installed it, car started back up. It ran better, but not as good as it did on the first test drives. So then I started driving to find out what's going on, and this is an issue many LS400 owners have had in the past. I searched online and I found several. If I wanted, I could find 100 posts online with sort of the same problem, but all of them had different causes, and I haven't been able to find out what the cause of my problem is. Problem is there's in a certain setting of the accelerator pedal there's this hesitation. The car doesn't have any power. It seems like it wants to upshift and downshift all at the same time. The transmission seems to be confused, and there's clearly signs. It feels like a misfire to me, to be short. I checked for diagnostic codes and I found a fault with the throttle position sensor. I tested and measured both. I tested a lot of other sensors under the hood, but all checked out fine. So one of the first things I did to the car, what actually started this project, is to get the spark plugs out, because I believe 6 of the 8 spark plugs were seized. That's episode 1 of Project LS400. And while I was doing that, I checked out the spark plug leads, I measured them and all. I replaced the coil packs, and well, I replaced the spark plugs, but I was much more on a budget than I was right now, so I installed the cheap option. And it seems I have ignition problems. I'm not sure if it's down to the spark plugs. I think they should do okay, but on the other hand this engine gets super hot. So what I did, I ordered 8 new spark plugs, the ones recommended in the workshop manual, and 2 NGK, a better brand, ignition coils. The ignition coils are in, and I'm going to replace the spark plugs right now. And I want to tell you a little bit about the ignition system, and I hope this solves my problem, but I'm not really sure. So anyway, let's go ahead. So when I got home I felt incredibly stupid. I thought when I had misplaced that jumper wire that I had fried 1 or more ECUs in the car. So when I got home, after I felt that hesitation, I went looking into the workshop manual. Now the problem is that my LS is a post-August 1992 car. which is the updated facelift version of the first generation, and the workshop manual is for the original LS400, which is slightly different, has a different ECU, and in electrical terms the electrical system is slightly different. I connected the TC and TS terminal in here, and I wanted to find out if I could have shorted out something. Now I'm pretty confident I didn't do it, so it seems this issue I have with the hesitation and the misfire seems to be isolated from the fact that I put in a jumper cable on 2 locations where I shouldn't have. So anyway, what I've been doing, I installed the new distributors, the new ignition coils, and I have these in. They look exactly the same. These are a cheap Delphi brand, and these are original Japanese. Well, original would be Nippon Denso, I assume. But anyway, the ignition system has a way of advancing the timing, even though it's a mechanical system. The distributors and the rotors are directly mounted to the camshaft on this sprocket over here, and it can advance or retard the ignition electronically. So here I have the rotor that is mounted to the camshaft, and this is the distributor cap. Now this thing rotates in circles, and every 90 degrees it reaches one of those contacts inside, and well, then it transmits a spark. But as you can see, this has some length to it. So let's say if it's in this position, it already contacts this point, and when it rotates any further it's still in contact. So there's about, well, I would say maybe 10 degrees of rotation when it's in touch with this. Let's say this part touches first, you can see that, and this part touches less, so there's about maybe 10-15 degrees of rotation in here. Normally the coil pack would release high tension at this position. When it's fully advanced, it ignites at this position, and it's fully retarded, it's in this position, and it does it electronically. And it's controlled by the ECU, and here are the igniters that connect to each one of the coil packs, and these units over here do all that advancing and retarding of the ignition. There's something going wrong here. Maybe the coil packs don't respond well to this because I had bought the cheap ones, and well, they may already have internally failed. All of these things look exactly the same. They're completely cast in resin and all. There's nothing you can see. They were working fine. Maybe they are still working fine and I have a different problem. So anyway, those are in, and now I'm going to replace the spark plugs. Let me show you. And these ones are the, what type is it? The PK20R11. I'm gonna check the gap, get the old ones, the relatively 2000 kilometer old ones out, and put this back in. I always tighten these by feel. That's what I'm used to, and it never failed me. But if you're insecure, these are expensive cylinder heads. You don't want to strip the threads of your spark plugs or anything in the head. So I just do a little, just a fingertip. It's about this amount that I put on. That's more than enough. This is how it looks under the bonnet, and those spark plug tubes are connected to the cylinder head, and this valve cover slides over, and these are the seals, gaskets that I replaced. The old ones were very brittle and they fell apart. Now you can see everything is looking nice here. The spark plug's tightened. And if you hop over to the other side, you can see on this last one, I'll zoom in a little bit, there's oily residue. You can also see the rust inside. This was the one most seized spark plug. This is where, well, I think water had been inside, But anyway, I have tapped this in a little bit further. I'm gonna tap it a little bit more to make sure everything is sealed. It's best to replace those seals when you have the valve cover out. I didn't do that because I waited like 6 weeks for these seals to come in, and then I already had painted and reinstalled the cover, so that's why. Now it's just a matter of getting the spark plug leads back in, and they go in a very specific order, or a very specific order, in a specific order, which we can forget about because the workshop manual has nice clear images. I'm gonna link them in screen so you can see how these leads run. Now this is a close-up view of how the spark plug leads run. Cylinder 7 in the back goes down. There's number 5, number 3 and number 1. And down here in this bracket is the number 3 lead that sits below the number 7 lead. Alrighty, let's have a peek at the right hand side cylinder bank. There's number 8 going down below in this bracket. Number 6 goes on top right there. There's number 4, and there's number 2. And here is the number 4 lead going down below the number 8 lead. So that's how this sits. Let's put everything back in. Now I want to check this connector because this clip is loose, and I want to make sure that the plug is inserted correctly into the ignition coil. Done. Well folks, we're 2 days later. I did finish the test drive at the same evening I filmed the last scene, but unfortunately changing the spark plugs and the ignition coils didn't help. I must say there is a little bit of improvement, especially when the car is idling. The car seems to idle a bit smoother. I don't know how that is, but anyway, that's nice to have. But the shudder, the shocking I have during acceleration is still there, and I think I have 2 options left, and one is the ECU. As I pointed out, I already replaced the capacitors on there. At a certain point in the acceleration I still have this shudder and shocking, and especially when you're going any faster than 130 kilometers an hour, and when you feather the accelerator or push it hard, the car starts to shock real hard. So that leads me to the transmission, and worst case scenario is that it has mechanical damage. The reason I mention this is I found an invoice with the car, and it was from the previous owner had the transmission flush, and there was a remark on that that said, well, it was low on fluid. Now it can be low or it can be too low, and if it was too low, I don't know what it was. It may have caused damage, and the other thing is that the level can be a bit too high, so I checked it, well, 5 times already now. That are the things I need to find out next. So well, I'm continuing my drive, getting an ice cream before sundown. Well, it already is sundown, but anywho, I'll catch up when I'm back in the workshop. Well folks, for you it's the next scene, and for me it's 3 weeks later. I haven't been able to do much work on the car. I have been driving the car a lot, trying to figure out what I am feeling. That stuttering I'm feeling under acceleration, on the load, always seems to come at a certain accelerator position and at a certain load level. And the one thing that comes to mind, which I recognize from my previous LS, is the transmission. It all seems to boil down to the transmission itself, and it can be two things. Either they filled it with a wrong fluid. Now this seems to be a fully synthetic fluid. There is a sticker under the hood, and it's also in an invoice. What I did is I pulled the dipstick out, let the car sit overnight, put a clean wiped off dipstick in the next morning. Then I could check the oil and I could see it was overfilled. It's over the hot level when the car has sat overnight and is completely cooled down. So that seems to be the problem. But there is one thing that bothers me like crazy, and I do have the parts, and that's the rattle coming from the front suspension. So the next thing I'm going to do is replace the sway arm bushings and the sway bar end links to the wheels. I hope I can get them off, and I want to make this episode quick, so I'll do a before and after and show you what parts need to come off and what parts need to go in. Status report: the sway bar link has been welded and the lower nut finally came out. All in all, this took me 4 hours. Now let's head over to the workbench and I'll show you the bushings. Here are the old and the new, and as you can see, well, it may be a bit hard to see on camera, but this hole especially is not round anymore, and there is so much difference in size. The old one's completely deformed. Shows best when you look down there. The older ones have flattened and widened, so they were really loose in their bushings. So I'm going to install these now, and when the paint is dry I'm going to install the end links. Another thing that I wanted to show you is these are the new sway bar end links, and as you can see, these don't have a hex for an Allen key on the inside, but they do have a hex on this part, so you can get a wrench on there. I like this much better than the system with the Allen key on the threaded part on the ones that came out. You have so much more control and grip when you want to install and remove these, so that's quite an improvement. Well folks, believe it or not, but in only 5 hours I got the sway bar end links and the sway bar bushings in, and well, it looks nice and tidy now. I don't look nice and tidy right now, but oh yeah, I sprayed some hollow section wax on the nut and on the thread. Also did it down there and on the other side, so the next guy hopefully has an easier task than I had right now. So the wheels are going back on now. I'm gonna clean the rotors because they got a little greasy. I'm gonna clean them, put the wheels on. Then I'm going home and do a short test run, and then I think I'll wrap up this episode of Project LS400. Well folks, I hope you can hear me. It's starting to rain quite bad all of a sudden outside. It's a week later and I completely forgot to film the last scene. I have bad news, have good news, and also have a bit of sad news. Starting with the bad news. The original objective of this episode was to resolve the stuttering under acceleration, and I wasn't able to resolve that. It wasn't the ignition, so I have to further investigate the transmission, but that's something for the next episode. Another thing is the starter is going bad. It's not severe at this moment, but it's getting worse over time. So I have to look into that, but I'm gonna do that over the winter time when I have the car parked over here in storage. The good news is that the work I've done on the sway bar bushings and the sway bar end links really paid off. The suspension is super quiet now. The ride is really smooth. There are no clunks and strange noises anymore. I'm really happy with that. And also, I didn't show you this on camera when I had the under engine tray off. Everything was clean. There were no oil leaks. There were no things sweating. Both the engine and the transmission sump were dry. The steering rack was a bit sweaty, but it hasn't got any worse over the course of 3,000 kilometers. So I'm super happy with that. As you can see in the background, there are my scooters and my small light motorcycle. Having them parked inside there, and over there is my daily driver, and it's loaded up with gear and equipment for another LS400 side project. I'm gonna make a separate video on that. I also said I have a bit of a sad note, because over there where my daily driver is parked at this moment, there used to be a friend's car that's always been lurking in the background, and I only spoke about this in the later episodes of Project LS400. That car was picked up a few weeks ago by the family of the owner, because they wanted to go to some old-timer events and so. And unfortunately, the owner passed away almost 2 weeks ago at the age of 94. And that means that the car probably won't be returning over here in storage. Yeah, and it leaves me quite sad. I hadn't seen the owner for quite a while this year. I know he was at old age, but to the very last moment I spoke to him. It was about 3 months ago. He was always interested in my work and in cars and in general. Really was a car friend, and well, I'll miss him. Yeah, it's a bit strange to see his car gone now all of a sudden. Anyway, on that sad note, I wanna finish off, end this episode. I hope you liked following me along. If you did, please consider subscribing to my channel, give me a like, maybe leave a comment, and I hope to see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.